Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Kerbal space program. I have been messing around with planes and rockets a lot recently, so what I wanted to do is put a rocket inside a plane. Now, we're all familiar with the idea of single stages to orbit. It's something that we've probably messed around with quite a lot. I know I've made a load of SSTOs, but I wanted to go for something different. I wanted to do something a bit more exciting, something less solid state, as in it's not just one stage, it's got a few different interacting parts. So the idea I came up with, something I wanted to test out that I hadn't done before, is to have a plane fly up to an altitude, you drop a rocket out of it, or eject a rocket out of it, and then the rocket goes up to orbit whilst the plane turns around and lands back down at the runway. It's not something I've done before, it's something I wanted to try out. Now this is my first test flight, as you can see, hasn't gone particularly well. Getting the balance right for these type of missions is kind of difficult because you have a really heavy payload and a really light craft around it to compensate. So I have this rocket, which is massive, and I've managed to detach that after a failed flight. I'm thinking, ooh, maybe I can recover from this, you know? I burn the engines on the rocket at full thrust whilst the plane falls back down towards the ocean, and as you can see, the rocket isn't having much luck. This was my very first prototype, my very first design, and it was a complete failure. For several different reasons, but now we can analyze those reasons, and we can use them to build a better rocket next time. Right, so first things first, rather than going for full-scale, big plane, big rocket, I want to make a smaller one. I want to do a scale model and see where I went wrong. The balance on the big plane wasn't great. Okay, so improve the balance. We want to have the payload in the center of the craft and fuel draining both in front and behind it, so that as the fuel drains, the center of mass will remain, you know, roughly in the middle, and as the payload leaves the plane, the center of mass will still remain roughly in the middle. We want to improve our balance with that regard. And doing it smaller means that the payload we're actually carrying is a small percentage of our total mass, which means the difference in the handling of the plane shouldn't be as bad as it is, well, as we saw just in that example then. So yes, I've made this sassy little plane. I don't know where the word sassy came from, but isn't it just? Just look at it. I'm using the big spaceplane tail fins as my wings, which are pretty awesome. They actually have a pretty good lift rating. I do like it. I like it quite a lot. And, you know, it's got 3 engines, which is pretty good. It's got a lot more thrust, and as you can see, the maneuverability is not bad at all. Compared to the plane that I just flew, this is my second prototype, compared to my first prototype, and you can see this works particularly well. Now, what I've done is I've put Separatrons on. Just not enough. My idea was to have the Separatrons boost this thing up out the top of the plane, so that it could fly away and work perfectly well. Only 4 Separatrons does not seem to be sufficient for a rocket of this size, even though it is still a pretty small rocket. Okay, well I don't want to just give up this test flight immediately. What can we do? How about I just tip it up and hope it falls out? I suppose I could swap to... Nah, that doesn't seem to be working. Now we're just losing altitude. Okay, how about an aileron roll? So I've got this thing open, it's just lying unconnected, I can just drop it out like that. Swap to it, turn on the engine, and we are away. So yeah, that seems to work pretty well, doesn't it? I mean, the balance of the plane is okay, the plane can fly okay, it seems to be flying alright by itself, although obviously I'm not testing the maneuverability right now. How about we go ahead and test the maneuverability? So now this is the plane flying without the payload, and it seems to work fairly well. So I seem to have solved the balance issue. And just for fun, now that I've got this capsule detached, I wonder if I can just... Whee! I wonder, actually, can I catch it in the cargo bay doors? Just going off topic for a split second, can I catch it in the cargo bay doors? I've looped around and my speed has slowed significantly, but I still feel like the relative velocity is going to be a bit too high. I haven't tested out those air brakes. I should really do that, but if I can just tilt down and get it smack bang in the cargo bay, and everything explodes. Maybe a slight design flaw. We will remember that for the third prototype. Don't go trying to catch your command pods when your relative velocity is anything greater than like 5 meters per second. If that. I reckon a command pod slamming into a plane at 5 meters per second would probably do some damage. But hey, that's not the problem. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to drop a rocket from a plane. So before I move back up to the larger version, I want to actually see this work. So I'm going to add on more Septrons. And hopefully I'm going to be able to eject this and at least get it most of the way to orbit. I haven't really thought about fuel requirements of the rockets or anything like that. I've just put on this amount of fuel and say, hey, this ought to work. So we now have 12 Septrons, where we did have 4 originally, so we have a significant increase. And with any luck, okay, it's half successful. I mean, it gets out of the plane fine, but the balance point of the thrust on the Septrons isn't any good. Okay, and another thing to test, of course, is whether the plane can actually come back and land by itself. Now, it's travelling very fast right now, so the answer is no. But that is because it was going so fast that the G-forces, as it wobbled, just kind of tore it apart. Which is pretty fun by itself, I have to admit. But I found that as a problem. With the new aerodynamic system, these planes can go really, really fast, even at low altitudes. Which is really, really weird, but also really exhilarating and cool, and I'm glad that it exists, because it is made for some very fun explosions. Right, so we redistribute the Septrons. When it boosted out of this plane the first time, it went curving backwards over the wing, over the tail wings, whatever they're called, tail fins. So I've moved the Septrons backwards along the actual body of the rocket, and now I'm going to try and go for an actual mission. So the plane flies up, 3,000 kilometers, 4,000 kilometers, and we speed up until we get to around, aiming for 20 kilometers, but, you know, this kind of height will work fine, I imagine. So, let us test exactly how well this works. We just glide it upwards, trying to get that last bit of altitude, because of course the higher up we are, the less the rocket has to deal with in terms of atmosphere. Open up the cargo bay doors and fire the Septrons, and it barely, almost, no, not really working. Not really working. It doesn't seem to want to do it. I mean, I think, did I at all change the throttle of the engines? No, I didn't change the throttle of the engines, which means it was probably just thrusted back into the back of the cargo bay, which is why it probably wasn't able to get so much height and any distance away from the plane itself. But I don't think Septrons are really the way to go, even though that may have been the problem. We can still do the aileron roll and try and get it to work. Even though it may have been the fault of the Septrons, or the fault of me not throttling the rocket correctly that caused that to happen, I still feel like it's not Septron's fault. I feel like that design just isn't really suitable. What I've been doing, and what has been working, is turning this plane upside down and letting the thing fall out. So how about I just do that instead? That flight didn't manage to get into orbit, so I launched it again, and I've changed the plane design slightly, and now I just drop it out, I swap to it, and I start the engine by pressing these buttons. Boosh. Now that was a bit of a delay, but I can get that speed down, I can do that process faster. And as the rocket flies away, we can imagine that the plane would then turn around and go back and land at the spaceplane hangar, or, you know, land on a runway. Which is something we will do, but sadly we can't quite have them both actually working persistently together, because as the distance between them increases, eventually the craft we're not controlling will get deleted by the game, because it's just too much calculations to have to calculate for 2 different crafts that are really, really far apart. So the game deletes one of them. Apparently there is a mod you can get which will stop the game deleting one of them. I'm not sure exactly how that works, I'm not sure whether I want to go in for that, but, you know, on the topic of it deleting ships, it's a pretty interesting idea. So here we go, I've managed to launch a rocket from a plane and get into orbit. Mission complete. Now I want to be able to do this with a plane and a rocket that is significantly bigger. But before I do that, I'm going to go back and model the scenario. So, despite the fact that the plane was actually deleted when we flew the rocket up into orbit, I'm going to ignore that. So, now we're going to redo the mission from the other perspective, and again, we drop out the rocket, we burn the engine, and we just tilt it up so that it's going at a nice angle up into the skies, and we can watch it fly away there, but we're going to stay with the plane. So we turn it back over, we close the cargo bay doors, and start bringing the plane around. Now just banking it like this at this higher altitude doesn't really work. If you look at the trail, you can see it's just falling out the sky. So if we actually just turn it to point nose down and then start pulling up, we get a bit more of a better effect. Although the G-forces doing that maneuver can be a bit ridiculous. as we will probably see at some point either in this video or in the next video. Because yes, I'm going to be making a video where I go to more than just orbit, but you will have to wait and see. So, we get the plane and we start flying it back. And you know what I said about planes going ridiculously fast even at low altitudes? Yeah, we see that in action now, I think. And there is Shokugeki no Soma. My dish is ready. I was watching anime whilst recording this, okay? Okay, don't judge me. Yeah, so bringing this plane down is the speed... Oh no, the speed is reducing quite nicely, actually. But I found that doing this exact maneuver and trying to bring down the altitude so that I'm, able to land on the runway, you can still maintain a pretty high speed, and it's a pretty dangerously high speed as well. I mean, right now we're travelling over 130 meters per second, if the little preview window I have is correct right now. So are we going to be able to land and actually brake in time? Because these landing gear do not have a particularly powerful braking torque. They don't slow down a plane too quickly, because otherwise, it might just flip out and die. So we actually go off the runway, we land on the grass, and we just about manage to slow down on the grass, I think. Not really what we want to be happening. In the actual mission itself, we really don't want to have to end up off the runway, so I'm thinking to slow down even more, rather than just landing straight away, I'll fly over the space center at a low altitude and then turn around, and that banking maneuver, presenting a greater surface area to the wind, ought to have some sort of effect. Okay, right. Now we have done our scale model, we've made it successful, it's time for us to increase the size. And let's just turn the cargo bay over, rather than doing aileron rolls. Why didn't I think of that? Okay, we have a cargo bay turned over. Makes it a little easier for us. And we have our rocket, as you can see here, a nice cupola module rocket with a pretty big fuel tank and 2 aerospikes. 2 aerospikes mounted on the back to give us plenty of thrust, and still pretty good efficiency. I think this has the potential to go quite a long distance. Now this little panel I've got here was originally just so that I could move the rocket back a bit, so that the centre of mass was closer to the centre of the plane. But an idea has struck that I could actually make it an anterior area. An anterior area. That is a really annoying sentence to say for some reason. But yeah, I could have Kerbals in that little section, and I'll have a look at that in a second. But first of all, let's just test out this plane I've made. It's got lots of surface area, and we're just going to simply drop the cargo from the plane, and it bounces into the back. Okay. First problem. As it falls, it hits into the back of the plane. I think I probably just need to throttle down to prevent that from happening, because it's similar to what happened to the plane the first time. Okay, there goes the rocket, crashing into the sea. How lovely. And now, of course, we're going to see how the plane flies without its payload. Remembering that the mass... Oh. Okay, I don't know whether that was because of G-forces or whether the plane is just terrible, but what I was going to say is that remember that the mass of the payload is now a significantly larger percentage of the overall mass of the plane. So it's going to have a greater effect on our flying. But yeah, we have this interior area that I was talking about. This interior area. God, that's annoying to say. And I have my Kerbals and they all work fine. So, I have a plane, got up to altitude, testing it about 12 kilometers or so, and now just trying to fly my rocket after it's dropped from the plane. It's already dropped a ridiculously large distance, an annoyingly large distance, because it seems to like spinning out of control. I've found, I don't know whether it's a bug or whether there's something wrong with my design. Hello, plane. But I find that the aerospikes don't seem to have the same thrust. So I end up actually adjusting the thrust limiter in flight to make sure it keeps behaving in the way I want it to behave. But anyway, I managed to get it under control, and despite all that messing around I did when I was dropped from the plane, and then I boosted myself up, and then dropped again and boosted myself up, I actually managed to make it up into orbit. Or, well, certainly at this point to make it up out of the atmosphere. Whether I have enough Delta V for orbit is a different matter. I think I do, we're pretty close right now. Less than 100 units of liquid fuel remaining, but But, this is a very big, squishy, wobbly but, I have managed to do it! Yes! I've managed to get this rocket into orbit, and I can rejoice with my proud little Kerbal. Right, okay, so that was just a test. It was supposed to be just a test, but it actually worked pretty well. Okay, right, now what would happen to the plane in this scenario? So, I fly the plane up to an altitude, only doing it to about 15 kilometers for some reason. I throttle down and drop the rocket. I'm going to try and do this better this time. So we start the engines immediately before it has a chance to drop too far. And we start tilting it up, and it starts falling backwards. God damn it. The nearest aerospike to me seems to have a thrust that is way too high. It's just pushing it off balance continually. Now what I'm going to do for my actual mission, I think, is I'm going to put fins on the rocket, which ought to help. And in fact, I've already actually recorded that, so I know full well that I put fins on the rocket. I don't know why I'm pretending like it's a decision to be made. Or you can see me limiting the thrust of the engine. I actually kind of use it to steer, and I think I got this on footage. But yeah, as the I did that wrong, but as it starts tipping in one direction or the other, I adjust the limiter and use that as my own sort of gimbaling. Manual steering using thrust limiting. That's pretty fun, actually. It's a pretty interesting challenge. I wouldn't mind maybe looking further into that idea as a weird limitation, you know, a limitation to the design. Or to the mission profile. Anyway, there goes the rocket, so we managed to get that going up, blah blah blah. We know that can make orbit now, so I'm going to revert back to the plane, and we're going to try and fly and land this back at the Space Center. And then, that is this video done. I've proven the concept. I've managed to get it into orbit both with a scale model and with a larger version. And this time, banking the plane seems to work okay. It doesn't break apart spontaneously, and I've managed to get it back on course without much difficulty. And now we can speed up the video footage to 4 times speed, or just, okay, or we can just cut out the flights. I suppose that is better. Oh, dearie me. I think I can improve this design a lot, and in fact, you know what? I know I can improve this design a lot, because I already have! I did a live stream! My regular live streams on Sundays at 7 PM BST, 2 PM EST, and 8 PM for Central Europe. I played Kerbal Space Program in my most recent one, and I didn't do that. Oh, I can tell you that that did not happen. Hi there, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, then you may well enjoy some of the other stuff I do. There's Let's Plays, live streams every Sunday, and of course a variety of interesting gaming videos. Take a look, and don't forget that if you feel like it, you are welcome to support me over at my Patreon page. Big thanks to all my patrons. If you liked the video, please do like the video, and I will see you all next time.